Yes, you can start. Okay, sir, now we can start. सर आप स्टार्ट कर सकते हैं अभी अभी
Okay.
ना
Uh, Good evening, dear students and listeners. Today, Dr. Kuman has told me to speak on economic theory of resources for the program Ecological Economics, MSD 014, and Block 2, that resource and economy. So before I start, I thought that I will just share that we all know that the survival of human being on earth is because because of the natural resources which we get from the nature, and over a period of time, because of commercialization or globalization, not before globalization, industrialization and capitalism, in order to gain more, and we all know all that, in order to gain more and more profit, they started exploiting the natural resources in an unsustainable way. So a group of economists who were very, we can say, who were visionary and who decided that if the rate at which natural resources are being exploited, we would deplete the resource base. So they came up with this ecological economics concept, and they started identifying, and they started, they added, in fact, to the economics, that ecological economics is equally important, and the quantification of natural resources became very important and vital. So now we just straightway, we would go to the topic, and we start some of the basic concepts which we have to study today. Now, we all know that broadly, natural resources, we all know that it can be classified into two categories. One is the renewable, another is the non-renewable resource base. We all know what is renewable and what is non-renewable. Renewable resources are those which that are capable of generating themselves. Naturally, they again grow over a short period of time. And we know the examples, that forest, wildlife, groundwater, then solar, wind energy, the sun, solar, sunlight, wind, and we tap the resources, we tap the energy from these. These are the renewable resource base, the renewable resources. And non-renewable resources are identified as those which cannot be replaced, and which, when we overuse these fossil, examples are the fossil fuel, that they will be exhaust. We will be exhausting all of it. So it was known to all of us. It is very basic thing. But I am starting from here, that the rate at which society is consuming this non-renewable resources. So the only option left is to quantify and study and shift the thrust from non-renewable resource base to renewable resource base, which science and technology and all other countries are trying to understand and put more thrust on the use of non-renewable resource base. Now, economists, they try to define, again, it is also well known to all of us, but just for the benefit of some who, who do not remember, I have just put it here. It is there already in the study material also, that they define what is the renewable resource base and what are the characteristics of non-renewable resource base, which I have already told you here. Let's go to further, that there are few terminologies which we'll be discussing in this particular unit, this particular lecture today, that there's a term which will be coming very frequently, is that stock flow resources. And what is stock flow resources? So for the benefit, I have put it here that it can provide flow of material and be virtually be any magnitude, but then when we use this material is transformed to resource base. And the appropriate unit also I have, it is already known to all of you. So I'll just try to go a bit faster. And similarly, what is the fund service resources? Fund service, in contrast, we all know. Actually, I am putting it up because we are going for heading for a bigger discussion, a larger discussion, where the thrust is more on the understanding that why ecological economists, they want these concepts to be known, to be discussed, and why these concepts are becoming more and more important for the study of this. And especially this Masters in Sustainability Sciences requires that this basic understanding should be there. So I hope when I stop the discussion and when we start the discussion, at that time also you can clarify some of these concepts. I am moving a bit faster. So now there's another terminology which is here on the screen. At what is excludable resource is one of those ownership. You can read it yourself, but I am just moving a bit faster so that, and then same for the non-revival resources and revival resources. It is known to all of you, but still I have put here. It's there in your material also. Now, this is important, that natural capital and what are the various linkages, what are the various uh, sources, what are the various, like there, it has two categories, that is biotic and abiotic. And we all know what are the abiotic resources: fossil fuels, mineral, water, land. And biotic, what is the resource base, or what are the categories that comes under the biotic? So like solar energy, ecosystem services, waste absorption. Fossil fuels not only supply our energy needs, they also provide the raw materials for substantial portion of our economy, including plastic, fertilizers. I'll be just going because these are the basic things, basic concepts which we all already know. Then stock flows, resources, rival both within and between generations, fossil fuels, what we call the recoverable resource supplies are those for which, what I will do, I will, instead of going for slideshow, I will try to show the entire thing at once so that we can have more discussion. Just a second, let me adjust. So dear, so we saw that natural capital, we had it is known to all of us that it is categorized under two heads, abiotic and biotic, and we have discussed this. So let's go ahead further. Now, fossil fuels, we also know this, that they don't not only supply our energy needs, they also produce raw materials for substantial portion. Then the stock flow resources, right, this I have already covered. So we will still go ahead further. I leave this because I want major discussion. Mineral resources. Now there are certain mineral resources that is fixed. Fixed in the means that the stocks, they are in limited, and they are available in a combined, in a combined combination of degree at various levels, various what we call at the within the crust of the earth, in various degrees at various places, and what we call the rival within a generation. But what I will do, instead of putting it like this, these are very basic things. Let's go for the major discussion, and during that time we will have, because these minerals, although these basics, minerals and renewable, need renewable, I shouldn't have put, but it is there, I have put here also. Straightway we can go for. Now here also, like water, fixed and finite, we all know. Then water is also different uses of water for different generations. We all know all this, but I just want to move ahead with the. Straightway come to the land. Now, land as a physical structure is capable of supporting agriculture, we all know. Then we also know that what are the various services provided by land, like agriculture, we know. Then we also know that land is fixed, and we know that rival within generation, that is intergenerational, non-rival, and absolutely non-dependable. Discussion. Yeah, we will start this discussion today from here, that renewable resources, let's try, I will just try to read what is there, that renewable resources, only photosynthesizing organisms are capable of harnessing the energy in the sunlight directly, and virtually all other organisms, including humans, depend on these primary products. These biological resources are traditionally referred as renewable. We all know already. Now, these are the material stock flow resources. What is stock flow resources? Initially, I had put that those resources which are there in stock and which flows and which provide, like tree, like the natural, within natural resources, the forest resources, the tree stocks are there, but a number of other resources that flows out from that, the biomass. So these are the stock flow resources. So we have to understand that how to quantify and what are the services these stock flow resources also provide, apart from the general understanding which we have, that from the what we call the say the forest resource, the ecological services which a forest gives. In detail when we go, so that we put into two categories, that apart from that there is also something called stock flow resources. Now, like non-renewable resources, biological stock can be extracted as fast as human beings desire. That means if human being wants to exploit these resources at a faster rate, it is happening, already happening, because of the requirement. So they are capable of reproduction. That means the regeneration rate is also there, that the forest will regenerate, the biomass will again come. But we exploit faster than the regenerate. If we exploit faster than the regeneration rate, so that we all know that that is regarded as unsustainable tapping of resources or unsustainable resource utilization base. So what is sustainable extraction of resources and what is unsustainable? That if we try to utilize or consume the resource base, the resource availability, faster than the regeneration, say a patch of grass, a patch of say alpine meadows, the grazing grass is there. And if we all know that if the livestock, they graze on those resource base, it will be utilized. And if there is overgrazing, so the time for regeneration is less. There, because apart from grazing, there is also trampling of the grasses by the hoof of these cattle or the bovine cat animals. So their nature needs time for regeneration. So we have to understand that regeneration time which is required, so that time and the way in which we harness the resource, so that balance has to be maintained, so that when we harvest a resource base or utilize a resource, we give sufficient time to nature to again regenerate, so that it is available in the same quantum, same quantity for future use. So this balance is very important. Now, this particular graph is very important, and I will be devoting some time here to understand that what does what we call the author, the Daly and Farley, who drafted, who studied this, that why there is a need for a balance between resource stock and what we call resource flows. Resource flows. Now let's try to understand what does this say. It is already there, but I want more input from other participants. They can also substantiate and help me also in understanding that on the x-axis, the resource stocks is there. And I have already told you that what is resource stock. On the y-axis, it is the resource flows, that is the growth, and and also the harvest. So here, this is a very important, that the graph we see that there is a MSY, that is the minimum, what we call sustainable yield, minimum sustainable yield, that we have to understand the limit of minimum sustainable yield, that in what way this understanding can be developed. Although economists have developed, but for all practical purpose, the planners, the foresters, or for that matter, the ecologists, now they also have to understand. Although in ecology, people do understand, do realize, but the planners and what we call the pure economics, they do not have this concept of balance, where they feel, or where the general understanding or concept is that there is abundance in the resources and it has to be utilized for the purpose of the need. Now let's try to understand that what does this graph say. Let's see. Now here there is on the x-axis, it discusses about the resource stocks. Now there are certain, and there is an angle that the resource flows the utilization of resource flow consumption should not be more than the 45-degree angle. So that means if we try to harvest resources at a faster rate, where the angle, this 45-degree, it crosses 45 degrees, it goes up very high, so it becomes unsustainable, because it will cross the minimum sustainable yield rate. That is here MSY is given. So what will happen when the when we try to increase the harvest, the stock decreases. That means the availability of stock decreases. The arrow shows down, so that it backwards. So that means the stock will be, we will be decreasing the stock available in the nature. And there is here, we also find that what is critical dispensation level, CD. Now this is that if we don't harvest the resources, that is also bad for the nature, because then we also find that if the harvest is very less, it goes below what we CD, the critical dispensation particular point. So then also we find that the stock decreases. So this understanding also is very important. I will give a very practical understanding that, again from the alpine region where I had worked earlier, that minimum utilization of resources, grazing resources, is must to maintain the biological diversity and for the healthy reproduction of grazing resources. If a forest patch is there and no say wildlife or bovine animals or the bovine cattle is not allowed in that particular patch, so studies have shown that the biological diversity of those patch goes down, and the stock, the health of those alpine grazing resources also goes down, because certain plant species, they start dominating and they decrease their biodiversity, and the stock also grows down. So that means minimum resource utilization is must to maintain the biological diversity and at the same time the healthy stock. So the harvest of resources, if nature has given, if nature, because these resources are available in nature, whether we utilize or not, they will keep growing, they will be available. So that means that balance is to be understood. That balance line has to be, we have to understand. Now let's try to see that there are three dotted lines are there. What do they denote? It is there already mentioned in your text also, but it says that, say point S, and if the resources are harvested at point S here, so what does it say here? It says that if it is here, so that means the stock ratio, the stock availability is decreasing because it is on the higher side. That means the harvest is more. At this particular point, the growth and harvest of resources is more. So what happens when we harvest more? So we find that the resource stock decreases. We have this arrow, particular arrow says here. Similarly, if the line, if this, say, let's take this point, if the harvest is less, so we also find that then resource stock increases. So that striking balance is very much required so that resources are utilized and resources are, the balance between the harvest and the stock is very, it's available and it is there. So this particular graph is very important for, now this is true for all other natural resources which is available in nature, including agriculture. People say that there are certain agricultural plots and land which has been left. Again, I will give you example from Uttarakhand, the mountainous region, that those forests, those villages where people have migrated out and they have left the agriculture land, and those lands are not being tilled. Tilling and agriculture production is not there. So what is happening, or what is happening is that the natural fertility of those agriculture land goes down because of the dominance of few weed variety, few tree species. So that means the land which is meant to produce food crop of particular crop, that particular land is to be utilized in such a way that there is a stock regeneration and harvest. So this balance is there in agriculture also. See, agriculture is a very controlled condition, but because it is being controlled by the farmer, who is utilizing, who is trying to grow certain things and utilizing the harvest and producing the stock. He's doing both simultaneously. So there, the land, the soil fertility, what we call the natural fertility of the soil is there. And the what we call, if a particular patch of land, it has been seen by farmers also and by agriculture scientists also, that is left, tilling is not there, agriculture has not been done. See, it is also true for the jhum cultivation also. In Northeast, where you all know what is jhuming, where slash burn, they cut a piece, a patch of forest land, which is left for natural fertility. And after that, they burn the land, they burn the vegetation, they cut and burn the resource vegetation. And again, they plow and put the seeds. So they get a particular yield. But so this is traditional practice of Northeast, we all know. Now this jhum cycle, if we leave this jhum cycle for a very longer period of time, so then also the input becomes very high, because the cost of clearing the jhum cultivation, the agriculture land, is very high and yield will be that much. So the jhum cycle has to be maintained. They maintain a particular cycle, a particular time, a particular year. So that land is, that particular forest land is left for regeneration for a minimum amount of year. If the year is longer, then the input becomes more and the yield is also the same amount of yield. So they try to strike a balance. And same thing, I gave example from the alpine grazing resources, and same thing is applied for the forest resources also. If there are some ecologists here, they would be understanding in this group, they would be understanding it better. And when I finish this, they can substantiate this discussion, because this, I feel, this particular graph where we are discussing that minimum sustainable yield ratio, and for the harvest and for the growth of the stock resources available, is very important. So I thought that this particular graph is to be discussed, and it is to be understood by all of us. If we understand this, then practically this can be replicated in any other resource base where nature gives stocks and we are harvesting. Now I move further, and now we are going to discuss the same thing what I have told. It is mentioned here. Just I will be reading it for the benefit, that the growth or the sustainable yield curve for a renewable natural resource indicates the increase in stock over a period of time and for a given stock. The y-axis can measure growth or harvest that it flows from what I discussed or to the existing stock depicted in the x-axis. So any harvest up to the total stock is theoretically possible. A harvest at any point on the sustainable yield curve, such as S, which I showed you, is just equal to the growth in the stock, and hence has no net impact on the stocks. So it is already, we have discussed, and further clarification can be sought after this. Now, we will come to straightway to the ecosystem services. We all know what are the various kinds of ecosystem services which nature gives or which the ecosystems are providing to all of us. But for benefit of some, it is there on the monitor. You can read also. I will be also discussing it, that living species interact to create complex ecosystems. Now, what are these complex ecosystems? These ecosystems generate functions. When functions are of use to human, we refer to them ecosystem services. That means there are certain functions which we are yet to understand, that they are providing indirect services to society, to the human beings. And direct services have been quantified. People are trying to understand, say that the green patch, the forest, the kind of services, the first and the foremost is the carbon sequestration, that it is a sink to absorb CO2, and it gives oxygen to the society, or it converts that into oxygen for the benefit. So this is quantified because this is a very broad and very what you call over a period of time, the impact of less green resources and increase of CO2 and the global warming. These the impacts are well understood. So ecologists and the economists also, these are broadly more under discussion by different groups of scientists and economists and by ecologists. Now, same intact ecosystems, I will give you example that say people who are close to ecosystem, say the tribal communities of a particular northeastern region or the high altitude or the mountainous region. Now these people are maintaining a balance. They are not over exploiting the resource base, the forest patch. They stay and maintain a balance. So traditionally, it was not scientifically explained by this community, by these people, but it was well known that beyond a threshold, if the nature is exploited or their resource base is exploited, their future will be under peril. They understood this. So they could not explain scientifically, but it was part of their tradition and culture that up to this limit, they would harvest the resources and they would not go beyond that. And that was because it was not a commercial tapping of resources. It was not used for commercial purpose. It was only used for survival and consumption by the community. So that ecosystem, and because of that, that balance they are maintaining, the forest patch or the available of green resource base. So that means that community is also providing ecosystem service to the larger community of those people who are not in the mountainous region or who are away from the forest, because they are maintaining that green patch. So that means apart from nature, people are also providing services to the rest of the community, rest of the services by maintaining that green patch. So there is a discussion which is going on that those community or those people, those tribal community, they should be compensated by the urban community because they are maintaining that balance, and those green patches are acting as a sink for the carbon sequestration and for their, and see, this is just a broad example. Apart from CO2, there are entire river system originates in the mountainous region. All the, say the Ganga, Yamuna, all the 5 rivers of Punjab, Indus, then the Brahmaputra. So they all originate there. And the communities of the hill, if they are maintaining that balance, if they are living, if they are migrating down from their particular high altitude alpine, high altitude villages, so that migration is also implicit there, that if they would have stayed there in those villages, they would have consumed more resources of the nearby available green resources. So that would have decreased the green patch or green resource base. So by migrating also, they are contributing indirectly to the ecosystem services. And so they should be compensated. So this particular discussion is going on, and it is very vital. If we don't try to compensate, then for our holidays, during trekking period, during summer, people go and reside, they go and stay, they go and take the pleasure of the cool weather of the mountainous region. So that will also decrease. Although a number of studies are showing that a number of studies are showing that the temperature in most of the hill station also is increasing, and earlier in some of the hill towns of Uttarakhand and Himachal, and for that matter J&K also, where there were no fans, now fan has become a necessity. Where there were no air conditioner, AC has also become a must there. So that is happening because of the global warming, and that is also happening because of the reduction in the green patch over there, and also because of the 2 crops in 3 sorry, 3 crops in 2 year cycle. Earlier, there was only 1 crop a year. Then it became 2 crop in 2 years. Now it is 3 crop in 2 years. Because of the demand, population has also increased. So the land tilling has also increased. Now, because of, again, it is very what we call imperceptible, but for the for the ecologists it is perceptible. For economists it is imperceptible. They don't perceive that much ecologists do, that because of the chemical fertilizers which has been introduced, the high yielding variety of crops which have been introduced for the mountainous agriculture system, so temperature is also increasing because those chemical fertilizers, they require more and more water for the growth of the crop. And water is coming from either from the springs, or water is being drawn by what we call electric pump. So there is a use of electrical, what we call the motor, or what we call the pump, which is drawing water from river and putting it into the field. So the CO2 release, apart from the vehicular increase, and AC and fridge, is also because of these. So all these activities are increasing. So the ecosystem services, which we are trying to understand, that that balance is being disturbed because of population, because of over exploitation of better living, you can say, better infrastructure which is being created. So the communities who are not residing near the forest patch, or who are away from the mountainous region, if they try to compensate by paying some service charge, ecosystem services, taxes, or cess, some form, so that at least people can migrate, those green patches can be maintained, and the water can be conserved, so that at least in those areas, the ecosystem services, that is all the river originates there. So at least the life of all the major cities in the Indo-Gangetic plain, those cities have come up around the river Ganga, that depends on the availability of water from the hills, from the Gangotri, Yamunotri, and all the tributaries of major Ganga and Yamuna. And same for the Punjab, the 5 rivers, the Indus and Brahmaputra. So this particular discussion needs to be understood, and it has to be, this discussion has to become more popular, so that the common man and the urban people also try to understand, and that demand which is already coming from academia in the mountainous region, or ecologists, that some cess or some ecosystem services charges should be paid by the communities who are residing on the lower altitude or in the plain areas to the mountain areas, so that they try to maintain that green patch. It is well understood. So this here I try to devote more time here, so that these particular area of discussion, these concepts are although understood by ecologists, but economists, planners, and for the government, these are still at a very, very, very non-important and very rudimentary, we can say, that this discussion is there. Now let's try to understand further that living species interact to create complex ecosystems, as we have discussed. These ecosystems generate larger ecosystem fund, and better its health, more services it is likely to generate. As we deplete or degrade this complex ecosystem fund, we really cannot predict all the impacts with. Now, here, what we have already discussed right now, that there are so many complexities which is not yet understood by the economics people, even ecologists, they understand, but it is very difficult to quantify. Say, the carrying capacity concept. The carrying capacity also, it's such a concept that it is very difficult to quantify and say that how much forest patch is required for generation of so much, for the carbon sequestration, for how so much tons of CO2. That is also very difficult to quantify. But a beginning has been done. So many ecologists are coming up with so many formula and discussion. Even if very, what we call, it is a very at a rudimentary stage, but at least this awareness is already there in the ecologists. So they are trying to thrust this idea on the ecologists and on the planners, where it is this particular discussion, this particular argument is not given importance. Now, after that, we will go to another kind of service, ecosystem service, which is there. That is the waste absorption. So it is already there on the monitor. You can read and see that the process of waste. I will not read, but still for having more discussion, that some of the waste is again renewable. That nature converts them into renewable resources. Some of the, say, water, wastewater is again purified because of the green patch. It is absorbed, it percolates down through a number of layers of soil, layers of gravels, and it becomes pure. Some of the water resources, when it passes through a number of trees and it absorbs a lot of oxygen, and then it also purifies itself. Running water, we all know, purifies itself. So that availability of nature's, those ecosystem, that good healthy ecosystem is required, so that these waste is absorbed and converted into again renewable resources. So that is what it says, that waste absorption capacity is rival in nature. We dump pollution into river, and it reduces the capacity of the river. This is the negative impact, that if untreated sludge or untreated waste is directly dispensed, directly left open without into the river, so it is what are the impacts it's going to have. And similarly for the what we call the solid waste, a number of small solid waste like plastics and so many things, they go and add. So siltation increases. Because of siltation, the riverbed also goes up, and because of that the flood is there, and it causes so many harms. And Chennai, what we found, that this is also because a number of what we call the traditional water channels which are there, people have made haphazard, they have clogged, they have stopped. A number of slums have come up into those lowlands, rivulets, and the disturbance, the water which used to flow down to the river or to the sea or to the lowland, it is no more going. It is adding to the siltation, and it is, when there is a small rain, the city is flooded. Same thing what we found in 2013 in Srinagar. Why that flood was there? Because all the small river channels which were, or the lowlands or the rivulets, nala which we called, which were flowing into the river Jhelum, because of siltation, because of illegal encroachment, haphazard construction. See, these are all related. But that's why I'm trying to link that urban planning is also very important in understanding the concept of what ecosystem services. These rivulets, these nalas, these lowlands, these what we call the riverbeds, they provide a number of services which is not quantified, not well understood. Say, from ecological point of view, ecologists have said that the mangroves, that the floodplains, they are very good sink, they are very good buffers, because they absorb water during excess time, and they release water during the lean period. So the ecologists have done it. But this kind of understanding, that from services they are providing, apart from the waste absorption, so this also has to be understood, that this kind of services, for their nature is rendered, the what we call the ecosystem services of these lesser known resource, these lesser known area, even by ecologists. So this has to be quantified and understood. Now, ecosystem process, this we have already. Now, let's try to go further and see what does it say that man-made capital. I would be reading for the benefit that human capital consists of stocks, as we say, of learned skills embodied in particular individuals. So that means, what does it mean? It means that the skill human being has acquired from either from the whatever skill, either it is a mental, psychomotor, that means the skill of painting, constructing, making certain things, or the human knowledge which we have acquired, in that all these things enhances the productivity of the labor services. That means because of our understanding of our what we call, we have, say, let's take example that porter. Now what does a porter do, or a carpenter? He brings certain natural resources from the nature, converts, makes certain utility products, sells into market, which is utilized by the common people. Now, this is again an ecosystem service which the nature was giving, where the human capital is utilizing, and he has added value to the product. He has added service. So this particular quantification is required, that total how much knowledge, how much psychomotor skills which we have acquired over generations, and that is also part of the ecosystem services. Now say a pottery or say a wooden furniture, there also we find that in utilizing the wooden furniture, apart from the wood which is grown in the forest, there is certain the artisan skill which the carpenter had acquired. And see, these skills in developing countries, the wastage is very minimal. They try to utilize all the resource of say when a tree is cut, they feed the leaves to the cattle. Small twigs which cannot be utilized for the construction, for the timber purpose, they are used as the fuel wood. So there is utilization of resources at various levels. Wastage is very less, and the main timber is utilized for furniture, construction of houses. So we have not yet quantified that a number apart from CO2, or apart from timber value, or apart from medicinal value of medicinal plants, or apart from the aesthetic value of flowers or the fragrance. These are another indirect services which has to be quantified and understood, that human skill, a number of people, community are dependent on these. So that is also part of the ecosystem services. Their livelihood is also dependent. Now, social capital is the set of institutions and customs which organize economic activity. It's all known to all of us. Let's go further. Now here, see, I am not an economist, but I will try to explain to you certain things, that what is the basic difference between a social scientist and an economist, and vis-a-vis, and say ecologist, you can say that. First, let's try, I will read this for the benefit, that biological resources such as fish, wildlife, populations are renewable resources, because as living creatures, these resources has a birth, growth, death cycle. That means a plant, a forest, a human population, a wildlife, a fish. Now, they have a cycle, they produce, they grow, they provide certain services to the nature, and it is utilized by the human resources, and death cycle is also there. So through natural processes of systematic reproduction, aging is there, and again another cycle comes up. So ecologists, they understand these concepts, and they see them that a number of services they provide to the nature, to the human being. But economists, they see it as an economic activity. So they try to harvest more and more fish from the sea or from the rivulets, or they go for commercial fishing. Same for the commercial timber. Same for commercial resource. Say what we call medicinal plants, which is grown on the very high altitude alpine meadows. The traditional community, they utilize these medicinal for their own treatment or for the community. Now that knowledge which they have acquired, it has become very commercialized. A number of Ayurveda companies, Unani companies, they have come with the formulations that these utility of these particular medicines has less side effects. So more and more tapping of aromatic and medicinal plants from high altitude region has started. What happens just after March, end of March and April, when the glacier and the snow melts in the high altitude, the team of collectors, people to collect medicinal plants, because that is the time they regenerate. When the snow clears, the flowers, medicinal flowers, they bloom, aromatic flowers, they are there. So they try to harvest as much as they can. And since it is the entire high altitude or the alpine meadow comes under the forest department, the ownership is under the forest department. So the tapping of these resources are not allowed. So they go and it is all illegal collection. And because it has to be collected in such a way, so those matured and unmatured flowers, unmatured plant parts are also collected by these people. And so collection is there, that is fine, but there is a lot of wastage because in a hurry to collect more and more, because there are so many competitors are there, they are trying to collect the resources. Why I am discussing this is that human being, the economists, or for that matter, they don't understand the value of ecological services. There it is only the profit. Net profit is the motive. They try to see that how much input has gone and how much profit can be earned and what is the utility value. But ecological economics, which is a growing subject, they are trying to emphasize and collect and impress upon the traditional economists that the economic value of such resources is much higher than the cost of the medicine or than the cost of the end product. So this, if we try to understand, if the society, there is a general awareness and more pressure is there on the community, on the government and the department and the institutions, so at least some pressure, some check can be done, and the services which were rendered, ecological services which were rendered by the ecosystems, at least that will be maintained, and more cess can be put on the people entering those restricted areas, more vigilant. The traditional communities on the outskirts of these, or on the buffer zone of these alpine meadows or on the forest patches, at least they will all, if they are also compensated, so they will also try to put a check on these. So this has to be understood and discussed. Now, further, sustainable management of these resources require the information on the nature of the reproduction and growth of the biological resource. Both of these are not known. They are known, but they are not yet quantified. So further quantification, further discussion becomes fruitless because we are not aware that how much, what value can be added to those endemic plants, to those medicinal herbs and plants which is there, or those rare trees. Say, we all know that there is a plant in the high altitude Himalaya that is called Texas baccata, and the taxol that is collected from this plant is used for the treatment of cancer. Now, when this was published around 25 or 30 years back, in some of the patches of Uttarakhand, there was a Texas baccata patch. Nobody knew, it all disappeared. So since I was working in one of the institute over there, so there, when the forest department came with the idea that suddenly they found that that entire patch of Texas baccata tree, it's see, it is high, it grows in high altitude, very slow growing species because of the extreme cold condition, has vanished. So when a project was given, they tried to understand that how it vanished. Then they realized that a number of companies through Nepal and through India also, they sent these people to collect the leaf of Texas baccata. And during snow time, because it is a tree, people, when the entire patch was under snow, these people would go cut the leaf of that. It is just like what we call the devdar or the pine. It is the needle leaf is there, so the leaf does not dry. So they would cut and put into the bags, and that would be transported by on the horse's back. And by the time when the snow melts, when the forest guard from the forest department used to go there, they found that the patch would vanish, the green, only the trunk was available. So these are the some of the things which we have to understand. Why I'm telling that community knew it, and the local newspaper used to cover that Texas baccata is on threat, but nobody understood that what kind of plant is there, why it was under threat. Let's try to see what are the other factors. That natural growth rate of renewable resources says for each population size, a maximum amount that can be harvested. So that means how much population a resource base can cater to. A sustainable basis without affecting the underlying population size of that resource base. So these are the some of the areas or gray areas which require intensive research and understanding and study, that how to strike a balance between the such resources, such services which is being provided by lesser known plants, lesser known crops, lesser known weeds, a number of, see what is weed? When we don't have any value to a particular plant, when we don't know, we term it as a weed, kharpatwar, and it is immediately cut and destroyed. Farmers or by so many people, they just try to cut and waste it. They throw it out. But there are certain value, certain services every plant provides, every weed, every bush provides some kind of service to the nature, to the ecosystem. So without any putting any value to those weeds, we decided that these are weed and this has to be destroyed because it is not good for agriculture. That is fine for agriculture, but it has a value. If it is not there, those weeds can be removed. Certainly, that it should be allowed to be removed from the patch which is used for agriculture, but certainly not from the burnings, from the agriculture fields around. So, but farmers slash and burn, or the farmers, when they cut and they just burn it or they just destroy it, it is on the part of them also that they also don't understand the value. And when the soil fertility decreases after 6 7 years of intensive cropping, then they realize that weed used to be there. So these pesticides never came, so so many insects, they never appeared because of these weeds. Now people try to, now they realize that because of certain weeds, certain pests, certain insects, they did not destroy the standing crops. So we try to, the learning, the understanding develops when the destruction has already been done. Now, sustainable harvest or catch will be attained if during any given period of time, humans remove an amount of equal to the natural annual increase. This is well understood. There are infinite numbers of sustainable harvests along the natural growth curve corresponding to different population size. This is nothing here to, let's go further. Now, bioeconomic model. Now, see, I will skip this because already there's a paucity of time also. Let's try to discuss some of the limitations of bioecon. This also we can see. Let's see. In this model, the socially optimal level of effort is shown at a given point of time. That is, changes in prices and technology. The model discussed above assumes constant input and output prices. This is known to all of us. The case of multiple species fishery. In this simple model, the fishery assumes the harvesting of only single species. See, I discussed weed, same thing in the nature. Certain animals, certain fish, certain birds who has more value in the market, they are hunted, they are tapped first, they are destroyed, they are, and the ecological balance again because of that goes down. So we have to understand that each and every resource, living resources available in the nature has some, they provide some kind of ecological service. So they have a value. So without whether it is used or not, whether the knowledge to utilize that is there or not, but it has a value, ecological service value. So that level of awareness is required. Now, non-renewable resources, I think we all know about non-renewable resources, that the limitation is there, that if we, because most of the non-renewable resources, the fossil fuels, if we overuse, if we destroy, if we overtap these resources, they cannot be recreated. It takes very long period of time to, for the mother earth to give that resource base. Say the coal or whatever the minerals is there, it has over a billion, very time, big long time series data is required to understand that how much time is required by earth to produce or to, to give the fossil fuel, or for a particular what we call the living being to become coal or what. So that kind of data, I'm just living, because the non-renewable resources, we all know the implications, that if we, once we utilize it, it is very difficult to replenish it. We cannot get it back that easily. But at least for the renewable resources and ecosystem services, the more thrust should be there on the renewable resources. That is the solar energy, wind energy. So those energies are, should be tapped. We all know, it's not that I'm telling for the first time, but technological intervention, that cost of production of that energy is very high. Cost of laying a solar panel, cost of putting up the windmill is very high. But once it is laid, it gives the, afterwards the value, or the it almost, it becomes free after several years when the cost is incurred, so it becomes free. So more and more thrust and energy should be given by all the ecological economists group, or the ecology, or the people, or the awareness should be there to put more thrust on the renewable resources, renewable energy resources. Now, resource exhaustion and limits to economic growth. Let's try to see here that the resource exhaustion would pose a limit. I think we all know all these. Growth optimists don't agree to these limit and explain it through the price. See, this is the problem with the traditional economists. The traditional economists, they try to gain, the basic philosophy in that group is that today the technology is not there. Tomorrow some new technology would come, and alternative to that resource which would vanish or which would become less would be there. And so people will still utilize that resource, or that kind of resource base, or alternative product would be available. So that is the basic philosophy of economy, that today you make profit as much as you can, although R&D from the same capitalist group, from the same, I should not be calling it capitalist, but since this is a capitalist mode of production is there, and entire world is there in the privatized hand. So they are also investing in the R&D also. So they are also simultaneously trying to find alternative ways to those resources. New innovations are being done to put less pressure on these, but they don't value to the available ecosystem services, value to the available resource base of this. That example, coal-based power, solar energy, fusion, that is already known to all of us. So let's try, after this conclusion, 2-3 lines, let's try to have some discussion, general discussion, a generic philosophical discussion that what are the gray areas where more understanding and more conceptual and theoretical knowledge is required for a healthy ecosystem, so that the healthy ecosystem services which are being provided by nature continues to be there for our posterity. Conclusion is that economists define these renewable and non-renewable resource based on their supply provision characteristic, availability, that if they are available, they have to be utilized. If they can be produced, they can be produced. See, many medicinal plants are being cultivated in the poly houses, in the glass houses, because this is what economists do. When they see that if the rate of regeneration or growth is very slow because of cold condition, they put those things in the poly houses. They are multiplying through the biotechnology, those plants. Certain plants which were not there, which were not developed by biotechnology, they are trying to develop new protocols so that biology they can be developed through multiplied through biotechnology, and there is a commercial tapping of those resources. So this is the basic philosophy, but they don't understand that certain active ingredients which is there into those medicinal plants in nature, that becomes absent, or it becomes very less. The utility of those, many of those such medicinal plants which are produced in such glass houses and what we call the poly houses is less compared to what is grown in the nature, because association of certain medicinal plants with the other plant which is nearby, or with that kind of environment, or with that kind of open sun, that is also required. Or sometimes I am forgetting the name, biological name, they call it in Kida ghas. Now this a plant, a kind of plant that is collected in the high altitude alpine areas of Uttarakhand, Himachal, and Nepal. Shortly after the snow melts in April, they call it Kida ghas. So that particular plant, it's a plant and it's collected by people, and it is used in the Chinese medication. So it is sold very exorbitant rate. So that cannot be produced, but there is a project in China where they are trying to develop a protocol that can be produced in the lab also, or in the commercial tapping. But once it was done, once it was produced, the active ingredient was not of that which is there in the nature. Now, next point is that the key point is how much an exhaustible resource should be exhausted for present consumption, and how much of it should be left for the future use. Anyway, these are very general conclusions. So we will be stopping here, and let's have few discussion on major philosophical and major concepts which was there in this discussion. I will stop here. Let's have some discussion.